Let us continue with Hugo Pinto, Global Solutions Marketing Director of ZTE Corporation. His topic is how to cope with the challenges of public safety by ICT. As a Global Solutions Marketing Manager, Hugo is engaged worldwide in sharing the successes and visions of ZTE about smart city solutions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you had some fun.
Just a quick survey. Who of you lives in a big city? And who of you lives in a big city and wishes it were a smart city? So, we want it. Go tell us.
Executive conference.
Okay, I can start. So, key question maybe is what is a big city? But that brings us to scale, and there are different countries and different scales within those countries. So, why the need for public safety, and which are the challenges around public safety, and why the reason for this presentation? So if you see this exhibition, and pretty much everywhere you see many people talking about changes that are brought by technology and by society. And as we will see, they also affect public safety, and they act by bringing both challenges and also opportunities. So starting by the agenda, I will discuss a little bit about the challenges, and then I will evolve from there. But even before I start by the challenges, I would like to discuss with you about the public safety use cases, and most people, especially people that do not work with public safety on a daily basis, don't realize that public safety is far more present than we think about. Every case of our human lives that involves some kind of emergency situation is covered by public safety, so it affects our personal lives, but it also affects our lives in mass events like terrorist attacks or earthquakes or whatever. So it needs to cover a very wide variety of events, and it needs to be present in many situations. So it covers scale, it covers complexity, and there is far more to public safety than meets the eye. It even contributes for urban planning, because when you plan your cities, if you have data about it, you will need to take care of public safety planning also. So, having discussed about the cases, then comes what are the challenges. In reality, we can think of public safety as being inside what we could call a perfect storm. That is why I put the picture here. Public safety is being pressured upon by society, by demand, and by technology. What do I mean? When I talk about society, we all know, and we have been seeing in many of these presentations, that both globalization and social networks bring in global challenges: people mobility, data mobility, social networks interaction. In fact, if you think about it, Facebook now has got something like 1.5 billion subscribers, being the largest nation on earth. So social events that are triggered on social networks can become global, the movement of people is global, and therefore the awareness is much harder these days than it used to be on society. On top of that, and in Europe this is a very clear case, there are budget constraints, and ever more budget constraints, and a tight use of resources. This means that society is putting a lot of pressure on public safety, but on top of that, demand is also rising. So natural disasters have increased a lot, and in the last 15 years, something like $1.7 trillion has been spent on natural disasters recovery. So public safety, and this has been increasing from the last 30 years, and will keep on increase. So this is a huge challenge. On top of that, there is a topic of urban growth that has triggered the smart cities phenomenon, which is an area I work on. So basically now, more than half of the population in the world lives in cities and works in cities. Around 75% of the world GDP is produced in cities, but it's not just a percentual topic. In reality, the population keeps on rising, as we have seen on the previous presentation. We'll be around 9 billion in 2040. which means that we will live ever more in cities, more people together, which with this globalization phenomena and social networks poses additional challenges. And on top of that, there are technological challenges also. So both with Internet of Things and with the digital to physical convergence, the infrastructures today are ever more connected using IP to the internet. And it's not only private infrastructure, it is also OT, so operational technology infrastructure, meaning utilities, meaning primary goods that we use every day, is infrastructure that we use every day and that can now be threatened where it could not be threatened before. So this exposes not only failures, but also cybercrime. However, it also poses, and as we will see, a potential opportunity. Since now the data becomes available, we can now act upon it. So in reality, it poses a challenge, but it also poses an opportunity, as we'll see. Now, the question is, if we want to move and answer to these challenges, and we want to move to a better public safety, what shall we care about? So the first topic is that public safety is not a one-size-fits-all. Different cities, different countries have different challenges, so the solution needs to be tailored. It cannot be a one-size-fits-all. So starting a smart public safety project, there is a need to assess the risks. And the risks will bring you the customization part of the project that is associated with the demand. So which will be the demand? And then you need to match that with the capabilities that are in place to decide where you want to go. And that has got to do with the supply. So which supply do you have in place when you want to start your smart public safety project? So basically, when we assess the capabilities of a city, we assess the risks, but we also assess the three vectors: the basic policies, prediction and early warning, and then the response capability. So in the first stage, we will assess the basic capabilities and the basic infrastructure, the basic resources. Then we will assess the coverage and the capability of using that infrastructure to do early warning. And in the third stage, we will need to evaluate what is the coordination and handling capability that comes out of the infrastructure, the processes, and what is already in place. Usually, we use a model of 4 levels of maturity, starting by isolated operation and finishing in smart operation, step by step. So in isolated operation, all the infrastructure and the data will be isolated. And in the latest stage, we'll be using big data, as we will see, in a prescriptive manner. So we will evolve from isolated systems to reactive systems, then already integrated, of course, moving to predictive, and in the end to prescriptive. Now, if we assess this, there are 5 areas that need to be assessed. One of them, of course, being telco and IT. The other one will be convergence, which is crucial. Another one will be data sensing and usage, applications and platforms. And all these infrastructure changes will imply, of course, management changes. So when we make this assessment, it can get quite complex, as we can see here. But just to comment that on the telco and IT perspective, for instance, you will be starting by scattered infrastructure, no use of cloud computing, no use of platforms, narrowband voice, narrowband critical communications, and you will end in the end with broadband, as we will see, and deep IoT and processes convergence. So I will go now through how to make this evolution step by step. So here we have the 4 levels of maturity, and how do we make the move in a generic way? So first you need to make the enablement of a smarter public safety. To do that, you need to do 2 things. You need to have ICT infrastructure, of course, but you need to make the model of what you want to achieve according to the risks. So this is the phase where the one-size-fits-all does not enter, and where you need to tailor what you want to deliver. Once you have the infrastructure in place, you can even integrate the infrastructure, but then you don't have the data integration. So you'll need to bring data on top of that in an integrated way. And once you do that, you will need to start to move to process integration. For you to do that, you will need to leverage the data and gain insight on that topic. So here you'll start to apply analytics, you will start to share data, you will start to integrate processes, where processes from one department will interact with processes from another department, but you might not still have converged everything in a unified platform, fully converged. So the last step will be precisely this convergence. So basically we'll be talking about society and interagency optimized collaboration. And here we'll be talking about the use in depth of big data, use of platforms that are already fully converged, share the workflows, share all the information in the same system with unified logons, of course, but exposing different capabilities and different modules. So this path raises challenges, and raises challenges from two sources, from a management perspective and from a technical perspective. Point number one to mention is that public safety is a cycle that has got typically 4 steps. So risk mitigation, planning and preparedness, response, and then recovery. And when we address a smarter public safety, the first step in reality, and already commented about that, is that you want to do a joint discovery and a joint design of the data and the processes that you want to implement according to the risks I mentioned, which will be different for every different city. So once you have a joint discovery of the data that you have already available, and this can be quite more extensive than at first glance, as we will see, you can then make a joint design. And once you have the joint design, what you can do is move from a phase where you're changing in reality the planning of public safety, and you change the way you manage public safety and you implement public safety. So once you've done that, you need to break the silos. And this it's obvious that it's not easy because the departments tend to grasp their own data, and there is quite a siloed mentality usually in these kind of agencies that want to retain their data and want to retain their power. But once you do that, once you converge the data, you integrate it, then you can start to predict and prescribe in a totally different way that was not available before to reach convergent collaborative processes. So the idea here is to change 3 things. The way you plan the data and you plan the services, the way you plan the infrastructure, and then in the end, change the way you manage public safety in the end. So in the end, what you want to have is a collaborative modeling and prediction, and we will see that there are entities that are not usually accounted for it that can contribute to this, and you want to achieve collaborative analysis and collaborative response where all the departments come together. So one good example would be something like a citizen is driving his car, and in a crossroad he turns right and he could not. It can be easily caught by public safety video surveillance and law enforcement, license plate recognition, and a ticket is issued. In this case, it will be a simple workflow. Now let's assume that when he turns right, he causes an accident without injury. That would mean traffic police going there, and that can be recognized on the operations center, and that will trigger a different workflow, but it is converged. Now let's assume it causes injuries, for instance. That would mean medical assistance, which is a totally different workflow with yet another department. And now let's imagine, and by the way, services like towing the car could be automatically triggered. So when the cars crash with license plate recognition, you can identify who are the insurance companies and immediately trigger a process where you can start taking care of the accident itself. In a 4th step, imagine it causes public property damage. It would need to trigger the services from the city that handle the maintenance of the infrastructure. It might have sent a lamppost down or something like, or a traffic signal down that needs to be repaired. So in reality, what we are talking about here is no longer managing the public safety in a siloed approach, but converging the data together in a unified platform. Now, I've talked so far about the changes in the management internally in the government, but then comes the changes in terms of society. Nowadays, the enterprises can expose a lot of data that they could not expose before. So let's imagine the utilities, for instance, they have information about their network now that is being digitized. So if there is a major shutdown or if there is an early warning of a major shutdown in a utility network, that will cause an impact on the city structure. So the city structure can react to that. Same thing about citizens. So as we have seen on social networks, the amount of information flowing and what can be triggered on social networks can cause a huge impact on society. So public safety can no longer be isolated within the management of the public safety itself. Instead, it needs to pay attention to citizens. And therefore, there are several contributions that can arise from these stakeholders. So both the enterprises can provide data availability and contribution to triggering. They can also contribute to risk management. So they can influence risk management and state their vision on the risk management within the city. And of course, most of these stakeholders can provide support in disaster relief. Citizens can even provide voluntary work. So these are resources that need to be leveraged within the cities. What I would like to leave you in this slide is that the idea is to get contributions not only from the local government, but from the society around improved planning, extended response, and extended sensing. So there is no way we should not see social networks as a form of sensing, similar to Internet of Things or similar to video surveillance, for instance. It's a different side of the same coin. In reality, it's sectional data that we need to use. And furthermore, when it regards citizens and social networks, we can feed them back and we can warn them about what's going on. So it's a key topic to take into account. Now, from a technology perspective, what does this mean? In terms of field force, there are two components that need to be thought of. One of them is the increased situational awareness that needs and can be improved. And the other one is how to use that increased situational awareness to improve the efficiency and even the security of the field force. So point number one, how do we do this? So there are new devices, new sensors, new data that can be used. We are talking about video surveillance based on drones or backhauled video or many sensors from the internet that can provide increased situational awareness. Key topic is, up until now, especially related with video, you could not feed video into the police forces because basically the critical communication networks are narrowband. That might not be the case anymore because LTE as of today is ready, and we have implemented several networks that use LTE based on a standard that is used by ITUR, which is called BitTrunk-C, that can provide mission critical communications and push-to-talk and video and group calls. Now what happens is that 3GPP is still specifying their standard in release 13 and release 14. So typically, the 2G systems based on Tetra, for instance, have still been quite popular as of today, but there is no reason why we should not start doing it on LTE now immediately, while this last stage of specification from 3GPP is ongoing, whereas there is already a standard approved by ITUR that later on will converge. This topic of LTE is critical not only from a broadband perspective, but also from a cost perspective. So when we talk about LTE, basically the hardware will be the same. Software is adapted for mission critical communications, but basically every year hundreds of thousands, if not more than 1 million, of eNodeBs Bs are shipped worldwide. And that means that the scale and the costs associated with that scale are much lower when we talk about LTE than when we talk about 2G systems like Tetra. So in reality, that solves one of the challenges I was commenting in on top, besides the broadband itself. But what do we want to achieve? Well, basically, we want to provide the field force with additional tools. And here we are talking about augmented reality, we are talking about multimedia capabilities, automated police force, and digital services for police force. We are talking about robots and the interaction that you can have with the operations center, with video back and forth, which provides a total different response capability and a totally different awareness. Also, the LTE networks allow you to, our system allows you to deploy eNodeBs that are portable. So imagine that for some reason there is a network outage or you need to reinforce the coverage. You can bring in a portable eNodeB and set up a network in a critical situation, and you're able to cope with any catastrophic shutdown of the network there. That is the visible part of the technical changes. I'm not going to dive into detail into technical changes, but basically, of course, we'll need to implement a cloud architecture. Cloud architecture is crucial from a convergence perspective, I commented on that, but also from a cost perspective. So disrupting the silos is important operationally, and it is also very important in terms of costs. And of course, big data. I'm going to see some examples on big data. I'm not diving on that deep now. And then you need geographical information systems, dispatching, and geographical information systems based resource allocation and workflows. This is crucial because it allows you to allocate the resources much faster. So whenever an event happens, you know which resources you have around it, you can quickly assign them and solve the public safety issues that are arising. So that is a key component that is associated now with multimedia, geographical information systems, and representation of big data within maps. So these are the crucial components that are not seen by the public, whereas the police, the field force is perceived by people. So people will perceive wearables on police officers. This is the part people will not perceive. So a little bit about big data and what you can do with it. Basically, as we have seen from data sources, we have from video, we have sensors, we have social networks, we can integrate enterprises. Imagine, for instance, mobile network operators. They know where the population is. They know where the population is flowing. So data about the statistics of the population within the city is, for instance, a crucial piece of information that you can use because you will know, in the case of a mass event, where you need to focus the security forces within your city. And of course, you have the social networks, which I already mentioned. Then you have big data with extraction, transformation, and loading module, and all the other components of big data. But that is the technology. What you want to deliver in reality is services like contextual and predictive policing, which means basically you know the patterns of your city based on big data analysis. So you know that in football games, people move in a certain direction, and what will happen is that the crime rate will increase in a certain area of the city that for some reason is not as populated as in normal days, or is more populated than in normal days, doesn't matter. So what happens is that you begin to be prescribed on where to allocate the resources instead of reacting to what is happening. So that's why you move from reactive to predictive and then to prescriptive. Other cases are, for instance, video analytics or IoT predictive response, or of course, social networks analysis like we have seen in the previous presentation, which is quite interesting. The topic here is always the same, is moving towards predictiveness and using the data that is shared to trigger services that are converged with multiple departments. Video analytics, for instance, is a topic that would take us more than one session just to describe, because you can do many possible use cases on top of that. So just to introduce you our ecosystem, of course. So basically, our system is delivered against the principles I commented you about. It's got 4 layers. So the sensors and terminal layer, the telecommunication layer, which is most likely the layer for which you know ZTE more, because we come from the telco world. Then we have the system platform layer that includes the data sharing and exchange platform, the cloud computing, the big data, and of course the analytics around the big data. And on top of that, typically, we provide software modules for both law enforcement and for coalition emergency responsiveness. So this is what we do in terms of platform. It's important, and here I'll go back to the topic I mentioned of there is no one size fits all. You need to understand in which country you are, which are the policies of that country, and policies could be about spectrum, could be about telecom usage, could be around, of course, data, which is a topic that is in which Europe is quite sensitive, although the European citizens understand the need for giving away a little bit of their data in exchange for the benefits that that might bring. And of course, that leads us to the information security, which is a key topic. Systems like this need to have security on many levels, starting from device security, network security, data security, and here we are talking about data anonymization, data encryption, permanent anonymization, non-permanent anonymization. It's a world. Operation and maintenance security also, so having a clear levels of operation and maintenance within the platforms and access to the data. And of course, redundancy and reliability of all the ICT infrastructure covering telco, IT, the cloud computing, disaster recovery, because it's a system that needs to assure high levels of integrity and reliability. We have been doing this for quite some time. We have been serving more than 40 customers all over the world. And what we like to consider and what we like to boost is the collaborativeness, and in this case we are talking about the data sharing and exchange system and bringing the multiple departments together, the intelligence which comes from the big data and the applications around big data, the fact of being ubiquitous because we provide public safety based on mobile broadband systems that have wide coverage, and of course being future-proof. And here being future-proof, for instance, due to LTE, which is a future-proof technology, even TCCA, which is the Tetra Association, recognizes that the future of mobile broadband for public safety is clearly LTE. But also regarding big data, because big data is now emerging for public safety and is a key topic that needs to be taken into account. So wrapping up a little bit of where we are and where we want to go. So no prescriptive analytics here. So basically, clearly, I could have been warned that the battery was going down, but there is no IoT sensor here to tell me that. If this was critical communications, could be serious. And I'm not. This is a good example of if the battery of a critical device goes down and you have no analytics on top of that. In critical communications, it's not like in here. Here I can tell a joke and we continue with the presentation. If it is a critical situation, it might not be the case. So basically, like I was commenting you, this framework I showed you has been recognized in 2012 by Frost & Sullivan as being the most comprehensive solution in the market back then, and we reassessed it now in 2015 by IHS, and the conclusion was the same, although the functionalities have evolved from 2012 to 2015. I will not discuss more about our solution or introduce you more technical topics, even because I am right on time. I would just like to make you a quick recap on what we have discussed, so where we want to go together with our customers and where we are now. So if you remember the first slide, it was half an hour ago, but I hope you still can remember it. Public safety is facing unprecedented challenges. And these challenges come from the demand side, they come from the technological side, they come from three areas as we have seen. And reaction is no longer enough. So basically we are in a society that moves much faster than it used to move. Things scale much faster, and being reactive is no longer an option. We need to move to predictive, and from then on we need to move to prescriptive. And another key topic which is different is that we need to tap the value of data, and we need to tap the value of social networks and social media from both collecting inputs and delivering outputs, and using social media to help us to react on very critical high-scale situations. And the other topic is technology is ready. It's not a question of technology anymore. It's a question of culture. It's a question of disrupting the silos. It's a question of policies by public authorities, and that is maybe the most difficult topic to address regarding public safety, because it's a very conservative area. So with this, I end the presentation. So basically, what we want to deliver to public safety is mobility and service agility. And we do that by implementing broadband networks and big data and sensing. These are two of the key components. And basically what we want to achieve in the end as two major improvements is integration and convergence, and of course social network inclusion, which is something that up to now has not been on the top ranking of public safety authorities. With this, I end up. I would like to see you on our booth in Hall 13, stand C12. And if you want to discuss with our experts about public safety and our references, please feel free to do so and join us there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugo Pinto. It was a very condensed presentation, and we really learned a lot. And I bet some of us will be thrilled to visit you at your booth.